Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on John Dewey's philosophy of education. My name is Jolynne Aszterbaum, and I am your instructor today for this lecture. A few weeks ago, we gave a little bit of a background about John Dewey. We gave his family life and a little bit about his education. Well, today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into his philosophy of education. And before we get into all of that good stuff, we have some order of business to take care of. How many of you love pop quizzes? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, we're not going to have any pop quizzes today. However, we are going to have what I like to call pop talks. So anytime that you see this screen, this image pop up on the screen, it is your turn to talk to the person next to you, your discussion buddy. You are to answer the questions that are in the box on the screen. You will have 1 minute to discuss those questions, answer them, talk about them. You'll have 1 minute, and you will know that your 1 minute is up after the very special song is over. You will hear that when it pops up. So then right when that music ends, we come right back to our lecture and we keep going, okay? So just know that some of our lecture is going to be interrupted. And so just be watching for that, okay? Be ready to discuss. Let's get on to our course goals and objectives for today. Today, I would love for you to leave this course having a clear understanding of John Dewey's philosophy of education. He is one of our most influential philosophers contributing to our education system today. So it's important for us to understand how he has shaped the educational system. I'd like you to be able to identify how Dewey's philosophy of education has shaped education today. And then on a practical note, I'd love for you to apply some of Dewey's principles to your work with children. Take some bits and pieces, take it all, see how it works for you when you work in your setting with children. And then also I'd love for you to encourage other educators to incorporate Dewey's principles into their teaching as well. All right, so first things first, everyone take out your journal. So I know that we have been familiar with our journals, our Learnal journals, and we've been writing in our little journals as far as what we have learned throughout the day and that kind of thing. But today we're going to start a little bit differently. And what I want you to do is open up to whatever page you're on, and I want you to make 2 columns, split it right down the middle. On the left side, I want you to write however many numbers you want. And I want you to list as many tidbits as you can think about of describing John Dewey, anything you know about him. Now, we have had a previous lecture on him a few weeks ago. We have our course reading that you have read this week, right? And then also, I gave you a little bit about him today. So basically, write any information that you know about John Dewey on that left side. Don't worry about the right side right now. We will get back to that in a little bit. Take a few minutes to do that. All right, let's get started. So John Dewey was coming from Michigan. He had already been teaching at a university, but he was coming because he had accepted a position as the chair of the philosophy and pedagogy department at the University of Chicago. Well, when he arrived at the train station, there was this huge strike happening. It was a strike with the American Railway Union workers, and they were furious over these wage cuts that the Pullman Company had, they had cut their wages. They were furious about it. It was a huge strike. And John Dewey gets off this plane, he gets off the train, and he sees this happening. He's kind of starting to take in Chicago. He's seeing that there's, a lot of immigrants. Many of them are illiterate, and there's half-built skyscrapers, and there's noisy meat packing plants, and he's just kind of looking around at society and just thinking, how can I make this better? I want to make a better society, where we can grow. And he really was thinking, he was really inspired to, he thought, you know what, schools is where it is. So he decided that he really wanted to focus in on the schooling and education. It's kind of how he sparked his interest and his passion for developing these principles for education. And so he created his first published work of length on education. It was called The School and the Society, the Child and the Curriculum. And basically, it was lectures that proposed psychological, social, and political framework for progressive education. These would set the foundation for his later work. So basically, he created what is called progressive education. Now, over the years, they have many people have misappropriated this term progressive education to meaning like a hands-off approach. That is not at all what John Dewey, that's not at all what John Dewey was all about. He was all about hands-on approach. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that now. So he really started to think about the school and what he would like it to represent and how and what he could do within the school setting to help change society as a whole. So his quote is that school is to be a reflection of a larger society outside its walls, in which life can be learnt by living, but it is to be a purified, simplified, and better balanced society. So basically, he was saying school should be a playground to practice future and the future that we want to see, so that when they grow up, they can go create it. So that is kind of what he started to really believe that school should be, basically preparation for life. Okay. So let's get on to his principles of education. All right. So he had 4 main principles of education. The first one is that he believed that children learned best by doing. He also called this experiential learning. So it's this idea that children learn best when they're actively engaged in something, when they're emotionally engaged in something, when their interests are involved, and when they're actually digging in that dirt right there and discovering what things do. He really wants the children to form rich and memorable experiences and then talk about it. Discuss what happened when we, dug that hole. Oh, we found a worm. Well, what happened? What did we do? What do you think the worm does? So there's so much that can be learned just by letting the children do stuff. He was totally against rote learning. He would not be okay with a lot of the history classes that we see right now, where you're just learning the dates, and he would not be cool with that. He probably wouldn't even be okay with, our 3rd grade multiplication tables, right? Because that's just memorization. I mean, maybe that, but, he's just not into, learning things like that. He wants the children to touch things, experience them, be emotional about it, be excited. And it should be formed around their interests. Find out what the students really like and then teach them through that. And so that is the first principle of his education, his educational philosophy. The second one is discussion. So basically, he believes that school should prepare for life itself and serve society as a force for innovation and reform. So basically, he thinks that the school should be like basically a mini life, okay? He thinks that it should prepare the students for life in a democratic society where people are sharing their ideas and learning different points of views and listening to one another and discussing and figuring out how they can make changes together. He was super into debates, thinking that debates help children form their own ideas learn how to convince others of their opinions, and learn to see from other people's viewpoints. That is not something that we see very much of Dewey, especially on social media and, where people just have their opinions. But no, he really wanted this democratic society where we're all just kind of listening to each other, learning from each other, really, really figuring out how we can, change things by talking about it and working together. All right, friends, you know what this means. Here we go. You have 1 minute. All right. Great job. Love to see you all discussing out there. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right. Let's get on to our third principle of John Dewey's educational philosophy. He believes that interaction with the environment is essential to the learning process. So basically, not just about, getting out into nature and things like that, but just being in the environment in which you're a part of. We are constantly changing as humans. We're constantly changing. Our society is constantly changing. So he believed that learning should constantly be changing as well. He doesn't want us to just stick with one idea and then that's it forever. He wouldn't even like that, we are taking his philosophies and we just stick with it and that's it, right? He would want us to build on it. He would want us to add to it. As we learn more, education should change as well. He believed that passive recipients learn very, very little. So he was not into, the rows of students sitting in a classroom, just listening, and, memorizing their things. No, he wants interaction. He wants, constant engagement, that kind of thing. So that is what he means by he wants it to be interactive. All right. Whoops. Not yet. That was the old one. Okay. All right. So the fourth one is learning is interdisciplinary. What does this mean? Okay. He really felt that continuity across subject matter was critical for learning. So let me explain what this means. So he really loved the idea. He gave ideas of, in other words, but basically what he is saying is, let's say we have biology. He didn't necessarily want the kids sitting down reading a biology book. He wanted them to grow a fruit tree, harvest the fruit, feed the fruit to a snail, see what happens, take notes on what happened, write about what happened, discuss about what happened. So that's what I mean, where it's across subject matters. Okay. So we're going where we have science, we have, what's going to happen with math, like cause and effect, what's going to happen with, how are we going to discuss about this? So basically the reason he thinks this is important is because it builds on the knowledge that we already have. So what's happening in the brain is that it's building more connections to the knowledge because it's building on what you already know and giving you new knowledge to make those new connections. It also helps students to see how things are connected. You know, so many times we are totally compartmentalizing all these subjects. But when we integrate them together, then the brain understands like, okay, there's some meaning to this. I mean, how many of you guys have sat in a math class in high school? You know, like, I am never going to use this, right? But what if you were going to become a nurse, let's say a nurse or a doctor, and you're going to need to know, some measurements for IV fluid, so you're learning some math, but you're applying it to what's happening in the patient's room, right? So all of a sudden your brain is making those connections that it's important, that it's meaningful. And so John Dewey was very much about making those connections, making it meaningful, making what you already knew, putting it together with something new that you've learned and making those connections. All right, now here we go. Let's do it. All right, let's come on back. Okay, great. Love to see you all discussing out there. I love that very much. All right, so now we're going to watch a little video on something that we have not talked about yet, pragmatism. You are going to learn about what it is and how it relates to John Dewey's philosophy of education. All right.
What is pragmatism? John Dewey lived between 1859 and 1952, and he was from Burlington, Vermont. He taught at the University of Michigan, the University of Chicago, and Columbia University. He was a philosophical pragmatist and was fundamentally committed to democracy. He focused on schools and civil society to promote the achievement of democracy. Pragmatism is an American school of philosophy. It holds that if something is true, it is true because it works. How do we know that science is true? Well, look at all of the stuff that we can build using science. Dewey's specific form of pragmatism is called instrumentalism. That is when theories are the instruments or tools by which we know reality. Dewey had a connection to Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau gave us progressivist education. We are progressively to learn from our experiences. Otherwise, we'll be indoctrinated into vanity. Dewey gives us a pragmatist, or what's known as a democratic progressivist education. We are to progressively learn by doing. Democracies best enable the sort of learning needed for this learning in educational classrooms. So what are the implications of pragmatism? Well, since the truth is known by how it works, then education needs to focus on having students progressively acquire skills. And that is learning by doing. Since how something works is always related to the way other things work, then education needs to be interdisciplinary so that students can learn the interconnection among skills. An implication of his instrumentalism is one of his unique approaches to teaching. This approach is that we learn best by doing, and it is called experiential learning. The idea is that You only learn to be a scientist, for example, by working in a lab. Proper education and skills should come from what pupils already find interesting. Students can be given a problem and then they can learn to work together to solve the problem by drawing on the knowledge of a variety of disciplines. Dewey held that democracies need both to educate its citizens in the liberal arts and that they could do it better than other societies. Democracies need to educate their citizens. Unlike monarchies or aristocracies, everyone in a democracy makes political decisions. So a democracy needs to educate all its citizens in those matters that are pertinent to political decisions. Dewey argues that democracies are better at educating, and since a good education comes through progressive experience and the skills of experimentation, and since democracies afford everyone an equal opportunity to experiment, then everyone will have a better educational experience than societies that choose specific subclasses of people who one might call the knowers.
All right, great. Okay, so now it is time for us to split into some groups. So I'm going to split you into 4 groups: a history group, math group, science, and writing. Okay, and you over here are all going to be in history. You guys are going to be in math. You're going to be in science, and you're going to be in writing. Now, here is the backstory. The backstory is that you got called in to be a substitute for Miss Miller's 4th grade class this morning. Unfortunately, she was called out very quickly. She did not have time to prepare any lesson plans. Now, using what you know about John Dewey's philosophy of education, using what you know about him and the way that he feels that school should be done, how would you create a history lesson? How would you create a math lesson, science or writing? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys several, maybe 10, 12 minutes to work on that. Now, I also want you to think about how it can be interdisciplinary as well. How can you incorporate it into other subjects? How can you, create those connections across subject matter? And remember, the most important thing, people learn best by doing. And so you have the next 12 minutes or so to go ahead and create the most creative lesson you can, because those kids are coming in the door pretty soon. All right, take a few minutes to work on that, and I'll see you back. All right, so we have had all of our groups share, and I am just so grateful. I love every single one of your ideas. I absolutely love that the history group decided to create a model of the Nile River with the delta that floods into the fields, and I love your concepts of building, with the dirt on the side and then growing grass on the side. Love that. I love the math that you decided to create, to build a box, and that you had to measure, you had to count how many nails you needed. You had to figure out the angles that you were going to cut the wood. I love that. Very good. And I absolutely love that the science and writing group collaborated. I love that they got together. I love that the science group was going to go outside and observe trees and the bark and the leaves, and that the writing group decided, hey, let's get together and let's see what science is doing so that we can write about the science that they're discovering today. So love those ideas. I think you guys did an amazing job. I'd like us to take a look now on how Dewey's principles of education have influenced our school system today. So many of you have been involved in schools that are very hands-on, right? So we know some Montessori schools and things like that, where their whole entire philosophy is doing. So you can see how he has had influence on these types of schools. Whenever you've seen in a preschool setting where, you go outside and you play with, water and they pour and things like that. That's learning by doing. Anytime that you've seen debate classes where they discuss and they debate a side that's not their own, that is also an influence from Dewey. Also dialogic learning, just basically discussion. When have you been in class, maybe in high school, where the teacher opens it up to discussion and asking questions, that's all been influenced by Dewey's principles of education. And so it's important for us to see that he has had a huge impact. Now, those types of things were not customary back then. And so we kind of take them for granted now, right? But they were not customary back then. All right, so let's sum it up. Okay, so today we learned many things about John Dewey's philosophy of education. We learned that active participant, he wants us to be active participants, that we learn by doing. Children learn by doing, not by sitting, not by rote memory, not best at least. He believes that discussion helps children form ideas and consider other people's viewpoints. He believes that learning always begins with students' emotional response, some sort of connection to the material, something exciting for them, and that education should be based on their interests. He believes that education should be interdisciplinary. And he is basically he was one of the co-founders of progressive education, and which was very, very, some people were not okay with it back then, but it has absolutely influenced our educational system to this day. And he also believed that passive recipients of knowledge learn very, very little. So I would like you all to take out your journal now. And on the right side of the column, I would like you to now write what you know now. What do we know now? So go ahead and take a few minutes to write all the information that you can think of off the top of your head. And then when we come back together, I want you to hold up your journal. I want to see that right column is a lot longer than your left column, and then we are good to go. All right, my friends, thank you so much for coming today. And I really look forward to seeing you guys next time. Your assignment this week is I would like you to write a 2-page paper on your reflections on a couple things. First of all, I would like you to discuss if you think that John Dewey's educational principles are being used well right now. Now, some of you know of schools that are really, really hands-on and that kind of thing. Some of you have been involved in schools that are not. So tell me your experience with if you think that his principles are being used in the classroom now. And then give some examples of how you have seen it in some ways. And then I'd also like you to reflect on how you could incorporate his principles into your own teaching or your own work with children. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful week. And it was so great to see you all. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.